Stop! The word ripped through the air like thunder. It wasn't a shout. It was a cry that carried fear, pain, and something deeper, truth. For a moment, time inside the Kingsley mansion froze. The echo bounced off the tall marble pillars, vibrated against the glass chandeliers, and seemed to silence even the ticking of the golden clock on the wall. Everyone stopped what they were doing. The maids froze mid-step, holding trays and mops. The guards at the door turned their heads, startled. Even the family butler, who had served in silence for 20 years, dared to look up for once. At the center of it all stood Amara, a young black maid with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. Her neat uniform was torn at the shoulder, one shoe missing. Her knees scraped against the polished floor. Above her, towering in fury, was the billionaire himself, Richard Kingsley, a man whose wealth was matched only by his temper. His hand was still tangled in her hair, his face red with rage. His expensive watch glinted as he clenched his fist tighter. "You think you can lay a hand on my daughter and walk away, you worthless woman?" he thundered, his voice echoing through the massive hall. Amara's breath came in shallow gasps. "Sir, please." "I didn't—" "Quiet!" he barked. "Do you know who I am? I could ruin your life with a single phone call." Tears streaked down Amara's cheeks, but she didn't scream for help. She knew nobody would dare intervene, not when their employer was Richard Kingsley, the billionaire who owned half the city. His word was law in that house. Yet, despite her fear, her eyes stayed locked on one small figure standing behind him, a little girl, no older than 7, clutching her teddy bear, her lip trembling. Her name was Lily Kingsley, the only child of the billionaire. And the reason Amara was being humiliated in front of everyone, just minutes earlier, chaos had erupted inside that same mansion. Lily had run down the staircase crying, her right arm red and swollen. Between sobs, she had said only one sentence that changed everything. "Daddy, Amara hit me." Those 5 words had set off a storm. Richard didn't question her. He didn't wait for explanations. In his mind, there was no need. His daughter's word was enough. And if she said someone had hurt her, then that person was guilty. The image of his innocent little girl in tears shattered his reason. His blood boiled, his jaw clenched so tight that a vein throbbed in his temple. "Where is she?" he barked. The butler pointed toward the servants' quarters. "Sir, she's in the kitchen." But before he could finish, Richard was already storming through the mansion like a hurricane. His shoes pounded against the marble floors. The walls trembled with his fury. When he reached the kitchen, he didn't knock. He kicked the door open. The crash made everyone jump. Dishes fell. A pot clanged to the floor. Amara, who had been quietly washing dishes, spun around in shock. "Sir?" He didn't answer. His hand shot out, grabbed her by the hair, and yanked her forward so hard she stumbled. The pain was sharp, but what broke her wasn't the pull. It was the look in his eyes. They were filled with disgust. "You dare hurt my daughter?" "No, sir, I swear I would never—" "Liar!" He dragged her out of the kitchen and into the center of the mansion, where every worker could see. "Everyone look!" he shouted. "This woman thinks she can hurt my family and keep her job." The other maids lowered their heads, afraid to breathe. They'd seen his anger before, but never like this. Amara tried again, her voice shaking. "Please, Mr. Kingsley, I didn't—" "Enough!" he roared, tightening his grip. "You'll never see the inside of this house again." Her heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. Her scalp burned, tears blurred her vision. In that moment she wasn't just a maid. She was a scapegoat, crushed under the weight of power and prejudice. But then, the impossible happened. "Stop!" That small, trembling voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. There, standing barefoot in her pink nightdress, was Lily. Her little hands were shaking. Her face was wet with tears. Richard froze mid-motion, startled. "Lily, go back to your room, sweetheart. Daddy's—" "Stop!" she screamed again, louder this time. Her voice wasn't the sweet, soft tone of a spoiled child. It was filled with something heavier. Fear, guilt, regret. She ran forward, clutching Amara's skirt. "Daddy, please don't hurt her." Richard blinked in confusion. "What are you saying?" "She hit you." Lily shook her head violently. "No, she didn't. It was my fault." The words hung in the air like smoke. Amara gasped, her hands trembling. The staff exchanged shocked glances. "What?" Richard's voice cracked. "What did you just say?" Lily's little voice broke as she began to cry again. "I fell, Daddy. I was running in the hallway and I tripped. Amara came to help me, but I was scared. I thought you'd get mad because I broke your vase. So I said she hit me." The silence that followed was unbearable. For the first time in his life, Richard Kingsley didn't know what to say. His fingers slowly loosened from Amara's hair. His face drained of colour. His towering pride began to crumble piece by piece. Lily clung tighter to Amara's legs, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you, Amara." Amara's lips quivered as she knelt down and gently held the child. "Shh. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay." But the truth was, it wasn't okay. Not for Amara. Not for anyone who had stood by in silence. The billionaire who once commanded empires stood there, speechless. He looked around at the faces of his staff, some frightened, others disappointed. For the first time he saw not just workers, but people. People who had witnessed his cruelty. He had been so blinded by power that he forgot what it meant to be human. The mighty mansion, usually filled with the hum of luxury, now stood frozen in guilt. Even the light through the tall windows seemed colder. And there, on the polished marble floor, the roles had reversed. The billionaire stood broken. The maid stood strong in her silence. And the child, the innocent voice between them, had just spoken the truth that would change everything. That single word, "Stop," was more than a cry. It was the sound of innocence breaking lies. It was the word that shattered pride, tore down walls, and forced a man to face the truth about himself. And in that moment, though no one knew it yet, this would be the beginning of Richard Kingsley's greatest downfall and his greatest redemption. Because that scream didn't just stop a man, it stopped a monster. And from that silence, a new story began. Richard Kingsley was a man who lived above the clouds, literally and figuratively. From his glass-walled office at the top of Kingsley Tower, he could see the whole city sprawled below like a kingdom that belonged to him. To the world, he was the definition of success. A billionaire businessman, owner of luxury hotels, tech companies, and global charities. But behind the tailored suits and polished smiles, Richard was a man who ruled through fear. He didn't just expect respect, he demanded it. Every worker in his mansion knew one unspoken rule: never question Richard Kingsley. So when he came home that evening and saw his daughter Lily running toward him with tears streaming down her cheeks, clutching her arm like it was broken, the world tilted off its axis. "Daddy! Daddy!" she sobbed, her little voice trembling. Richard dropped his phone, instantly kneeling beside her. "What happened, sweetheart? Who did this to you?" She hiccuped between tears. "Amara hit me." For a second, Richard didn't even process the name. Then it hit him. The maid. The maid he had hired only months ago. His jaw tightened and his face turned red. "She what?" Lily nodded quickly, her curls bouncing. "She was mad at me. I didn't mean to make her angry, Daddy." That was all it took. Richard rose from his knees, his hands curling into fists. His heart pounded like thunder, not with reason but with rage. To him, this wasn't just about a worker hurting his child. It was about disrespect. Nobody hurt what was his. Without asking another question, without calling for anyone's side of the story, he stormed out of the living room like a man possessed. His footsteps echoed down the hallway like the sound of doom itself. "Where is she?" he bellowed. The butler, an older man who had served the family for decades, hesitated. "Sir, Amara is in the kitchen, preparing dinner. But perhaps—" "Don't perhaps me," Richard snapped, cutting him off. "If she's there, then she's about to regret ever setting foot in this house." The staff heard him before they saw him. His voice, deep and fiery, rolled down the corridors. Every maid, every cook, froze in place. Inside the kitchen, Amara was humming softly as she stirred a pot of soup. The scent of herbs and butter filled the air. It was one of the few moments in her day that brought her peace. Then the door burst open. Bang! She jumped, the spoon slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. "Mr. Kingsley?" she stammered, wiping her hands on her apron. "Is something wrong, sir?" But before she could finish, Richard was already across the room. He grabbed her by the arm, his grip like iron. "What did you do to my daughter?" he demanded, his face inches from hers. Amara's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, I don't understand." "You hit her!" he shouted, shaking her arm. "You think I wouldn't find out?" Her heart dropped. "No, sir. I would never. I swear I didn't." "Liar!" His voice boomed so loud that the windows rattled. The other maids stood frozen in the corners, terrified to speak. "Sir, please!" Amara cried out, trying to pull her arm free. "I didn't touch Miss Lily. She fell." But her words only fueled his anger. He dragged her out of the kitchen and into the grand hall. "You dare talk back to me?" he yelled, yanking her hair so hard she winced in pain. Her bare feet scraped against the cold marble as she stumbled behind him, tears streaking her face. "Everyone come here," he shouted. "Come see what happens when someone lays a hand on my family." The staff gathered reluctantly, their faces pale with fear. They had seen their employer angry before, but never this angry. Richard stood in the center of the room, gripping Amara's hair in one hand like she was a criminal caught in the act. His expensive watch gleamed under the chandelier. "Look at her!" he barked. "This is the woman I trusted around my child! This is the woman who thinks she can raise her hand against Lily Kingsley!" Amara's voice trembled as she spoke. "Sir, I didn't hurt her. I swear on my mother's life." "Enough of your lies!" he snapped, shaking her by the shoulder. "You'll never work in this city again after today. I'll make sure of it." Her knees hit the floor, but even from down there, her dignity stayed in her eyes. "Please, sir," she whispered, "listen to me. I've cared for Lily since the day I came here. She's like my own daughter. I could never hurt her," but her plea fell on deaf ears. Richard Kingsley wasn't a man who listened. He was a man who commanded, and in his world, servants didn't talk back. The more she spoke, the more it burned his pride. He saw her tears, but instead of guilt, he felt power. His anger wasn't just about his daughter anymore. It was about control, about making sure this woman knew her place. He had worked his whole life to build an empire from nothing. Born poor, abandoned by his father, Richard had clawed his way to the top through grit and ruthless ambition. Now, no one dared to disobey him. Not business rivals, not employees, not even the people under his roof. So when Amara begged, it wasn't mercy he heard, it was defiance. And defiance was something Richard Kingsley could not tolerate. "You'll regret the day you ever stepped foot in this house," he growled, pulling her toward the door. But just then something stopped him, a sound. Soft, faint, a child's cry. He turned. At the top of the staircase stood Lily, clutching her teddy bear. Her small face was pale with shock. Her blue eyes were wide with horror. "Daddy." "Please don't hurt her," she whispered. Richard blinked, his chest heaving. "Sweetheart, go back to your room. Daddy's handling it." But Lily didn't move. She took one trembling step forward. "Please, Daddy, don't hurt Amara," she said again, her voice breaking. "Lily, she hit you," he barked, his anger returning. And then the word that changed everything left her lips, shaky but strong enough to slice through the tension in the room. "Stop!" It wasn't just a command. It was a scream, filled with truth. The entire mansion went silent. The guards froze. The butler stopped breathing. Even Richard felt his fingers loosen from Amara's hair as his heart skipped a beat. Lily's face crumpled. "Daddy, I lied." The words hit like lightning. "I fell down, Daddy. I was running too fast and I tripped. Amara tried to help me up, but I was scared you'd be mad because I broke your vase. I didn't mean to lie. I didn't want her to get hurt." Tears spilled from her eyes as she ran toward Amara, wrapping her arms around her waist. "I'm sorry, Amara. Please don't leave." The billionaire's hand fell to his side, heavy and useless. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. In one moment, everything he thought he knew, about power, about control, about truth, shattered. The girl he loved most in the world had revealed the ugliest truth. His anger wasn't protecting anyone. It was destroying everything. And in that silence, for the first time in years, Richard Kingsley felt something he had long buried under money, pride, and reputation. Shame. That shame would burn him for days. But at that moment, standing in his grand marble hall, with a maid crying on the floor and a child clutching her tightly, Richard Kingsley began to understand something that would haunt him forever. You can build towers with money, but one lie can bring them crashing down. The silence after Lily's confession felt heavier than stone. The mighty mansion, usually filled with footsteps, whispers, and the faint hum of wealth, was now frozen in disbelief. The billionaire, Richard Kingsley, stood motionless in the center of the grand hall, his hands still half raised, his face drained of color. His grip on Amara's hair loosened completely. For a second, he just stared, first at the trembling maid, then at his daughter. The little girl's words kept replaying in his mind, like an echo he couldn't escape. "I lied." The three smallest words in the world, yet they struck harder than any weapon. Amara, still on her knees, stared up in shock. Her breath came out in quick, shaky bursts. For the last few minutes, she had believed her life was over, that one false accusation would destroy everything she'd worked for. Now, hearing the truth fall from the child's lips, her tears spilled harder, not from pain, but from relief too overwhelming to contain. Lily ran toward her, dropping her teddy bear on the floor. She threw her arms around Amara's waist, crying uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't leave, Amara." Amara gently placed a hand on the child's back. Her own hands still trembled from the roughness of being dragged and humiliated, but she forced her voice to stay calm. "Shh. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay." But everyone in that hall knew. It wasn't okay. The maids exchanged glances of shock and sympathy. The guards lowered their eyes, ashamed they hadn't intervened. Even the old butler, who had served Richard for decades, looked at his employer with silent disappointment. No one dared speak. Richard finally exhaled, a long, shaky breath. His chest felt tight, his throat dry. "Lily," he began softly, but his voice cracked. He had yelled so much moments ago, yet now he could barely form a single word. The little girl looked up at him through teary eyes. "Daddy, please don't be mad. I was scared. I didn't want you to be angry with me for breaking your vase. Amara didn't do anything. Richard swallowed hard, his jaw clenched, his mind spinning. Shame, guilt, disbelief, they all collided inside him. He looked down at Amara, who now sat quietly on the floor, holding Lily protectively, her face wet with tears. The same woman he had dragged by her hair, called worthless and humiliated in front of everyone, was now the same woman comforting his child, the one she had just saved from his own rage. And in that moment, he realized something that stung deep in his chest. He had become the villain. The silence stretched. Even the air felt heavy. Finally, the butler, old Mr. Harris, took a small step forward. "Sir," he said carefully, "perhaps we should let Miss Amara explain what truly happened." Richard blinked. The suggestion hit like a slap of reality. He nodded slowly, almost dazed. "Yes. Yes, of course." His voice was softer now. Fragile. Uncertain. Amara hesitated. She didn't want to speak, but she owed it to herself to be heard. She took a deep breath and began. "I was in the hallway," she said quietly, her voice still trembling. "Lily was running to show me her drawing. She tripped over the carpet and fell near the table. When I rushed to help her up, she started crying. I tried to calm her, but I saw the vase had broken. I was scared too. I know how much that vase meant to you, sir." Richard rubbed his forehead. That vase had been a family heirloom worth thousands, yet right now it felt worthless compared to the guilt weighing on him. Amara continued softly. "When she ran off, I thought maybe she went to her room. The next thing I knew, you were there." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Dragging me." A painful silence followed her words. No one dared move. Richard's throat tightened. "Amara," he began, but the words stuck. He had yelled at her for minutes, yet now, even speaking her name felt heavy with guilt. Lily clung tighter to Amara, tears still streaking her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whimpered. "Please don't fire her. Please." Richard's gaze softened. He crouched slowly, leveling himself with his daughter. He gently brushed her hair back from her face. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't have lied. You could have gotten someone hurt, someone innocent." Lily nodded, sobbing harder. "I know. I was scared." Richard's heart twisted. "I know you were. But what you did could have ruined her life." Then he turned to Amara. Their eyes met. Hers were red and swollen, but there was no hatred in them. Only hurt. For a man like Richard, used to controlling boardrooms and commanding respect, that silent gaze cut deeper than any accusation. He straightened, guilt and regret flooding his expression. "Everyone, leave us," he said quietly. The staff exchanged uncertain glances, but the authority in his voice, even broken, was still command enough. One by one, they exited the hall until only 3 remained: the billionaire, the maid, and the child. When the last door closed, Richard sighed deeply. The echo of his anger still haunted the room. He paced for a moment, rubbing his temples. "I don't even know where to begin," he said under his breath. Amara said nothing. She just stood there holding Lily's hand. Richard looked up at her. "I was wrong," he admitted finally. The words tasted strange on his tongue. He wasn't used to saying them. "I should have listened. I shouldn't have touched you. He paused, his voice breaking. "I let my anger take over." Amara's lips parted slightly, but she stayed silent. She wanted to believe him, but words alone couldn't undo the humiliation, the pain, or the fear she'd felt moments ago. She simply said, "I understand, sir. Parents protect their children." Her words were calm, respectful, but behind them was a quiet strength. Richard shook his head slowly. No, Amara. That's not protection. That was pride. That was blindness. He sat down on one of the leather couches, his hands trembling slightly. I've spent my whole life building walls around me. I thought money could make me right. That power made me just. But today, I looked at you, and I saw what I really am. The confession hung heavy between them. Amara blinked back tears. We all make mistakes, sir. It's what we do after them that matters. Her voice, though soft, carried weight. It was the same voice that had been silenced minutes ago, but now it filled the hall with calm authority. Lily sniffled, looking between them. Can Amara stay, Daddy? Please? Richard looked at his daughter, the innocence in her eyes, the truth that had saved him from becoming something monstrous. Yes, he said quietly. She's not just staying. She's part of this family now. Lily smiled through her tears and threw her arms around Amara again. Thank you, Daddy. For the first time that night, Richard managed a small, broken smile. No, sweetheart. Thank you. Then his eyes met Amara's once more. You saved my daughter, he said. But tonight, you also saved me. Amara looked away, emotion welling up in her chest. She didn't need his praise. She didn't even need his apology. What she needed, what she deserved, was respect. And from that moment on, Richard silently vowed that he would never again raise his hand in anger, never again let his power blind him to humanity. Outside, the night sky over the Kingsley mansion was quiet, the wind carrying only whispers. Inside, the echoes of a single truth lingered, spoken by a child, heard by a man, and felt by a woman who had endured more than anyone ever should. Because sometimes, the smallest voices tell the biggest truths,